Podcasters Unite. Ready to dive into something awesome? Welcome to the Next Legacy Podcast, your #1 station for the people. Here we bring you stories, interviews, and conversations that matter. Whether you're commuting, cooking, or just chilling, Next Legacy has got your back. Join our community of listeners who crave insightful content and good vibes. From trending topics to hidden gems, we cover it all with a touch of humor and a whole lot of heart. So, plug in those earphones, hit that subscribe button, and let's make today a little brighter together. Tune in now to the Next Legacy Podcast, where every episode feels like home.
All right, let's get this party started. What's good, people? This is Charles Madison of Next Legacy Radio, and I have a wonderful guest with me. Chance meeting at an event last week, and I started thinking, I'm like, okay, this man has not only a specific talent and a skill set that I would love to talk to him about, but he actually has more when it comes to him being an author and doing some work on Series XM, Dry Bar, host of award-winning series, David's Ark, and, I'm sure he has like 15 million other jobs that he does in addition to what's going on right now. So David Studebaker is my guest on Next Legacy. What's good, sir?
Hey, oh man, I am very honored and happy to be here after giving you a totally above board weird lap dance at that show, which we can explain or not explain, whatever you prefer, however you want to leave that out there. But David, you can't leave the audience thinking like, we might as well start there. So people out there that's listening will be listening. I had an opportunity to see this man perform and do his thing live at an event last week. And like I said to start the show, I came away amazed by just his professionalism, but also having an opportunity to control the crowd, keep a crowd engaged. Certain things that certain people have a hard time doing. So in the midst of, I want to call it a comedy act, but also it was really a lot of improv, which I got to give you a lot of credit for. A lot of people don't know the work that it takes to come up off the top rope with so many different things. But, towards the end, being sitting in the front, as he warned me, he closed the show by giving your man right here a very impromptu, awkward, funny, and, a classic lap dance or dance to close out. And I couldn't stop laughing afterwards because I told my girl afterwards, I was like, you know what, I'm going to have to search this man and find this man and interview this man. So based on your show performance, sir, explain. Yeah. It was Charles did not hire me for a lap dance. Let's make that very clear. That was so basically the event, I do a lot of, in addition to just like, comedy clubs and normal stand-up shows that I do all over the place, I also do a lot of fundraisers and private events, and anytime I can do one for a good cause like the one you were at. And you know what, Charles, you really are a giving man, because I saw that was $75 a pop for tickets. So Charles cares about the community. That's too rich for my blood. But sometimes it's like, a lot of times they either have me do like MC the event or do like a kind of headline as a stand-up act. This one, the woman who ran it was so nice and so cool, and so I was happy to do both. I did double duty, but one of my closing bits, I have a couple different closers, both of which torment whatever nice person is in the front row. But one of them is because the premise is basically people say that like the most awkward live event to be front row at is a comedy show. Right. And I'm like I said to Charles, you experienced that, but it's actually wrong. I experienced the most awkward live event to be front row, and it's a true story of when I was at an adult dance recital, not adults like strippers, but an adult adults were doing real interpretive dance
But there was this one dude in the troupe who was like 6'8", 250, and was just like looked angry. And for 2 hours, he just like was making eye contact with me. And so basically the bit is I do a big long act out of that guy, you know, just staring me down angrily and grinding. And I did that to Charles, and he took it like a champ, and just a wonderful guy. So there you go.
Loved it. Not only that, like I said, I walked away. Actually, I drove away, as I mentioned, telling my girl I need to go find this guy on social media and interview this guy, but also celebrate your talents because, and I know you know this throughout your career, and I'll ask the basic specific questions in regards to it in a sec, but you know how it is, David. We have to give people flowers and celebrate their talents for whatever it is they do, and I had to reach out and extend that to you as well. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's how it all came to be. So tell me and the listeners, like, when did this become a thing for you that you wanted to pursue this, not only long term, but try to get a niche into this business that that we're talking about today?
Yeah, so I've been doing it about 15 years now. I started when I was 19, and I grew up in the Bay Area. I briefly lived in San Francisco, but my aunt and uncle lived in San Francisco. And so when I was like 14, at a really young age, they would sneak me into the Punchline, which is like the legendary club in San Francisco, and I'd sit front row and watch shows that I probably was too young to be watching. But that was where I kind of got exposed to the fact that there was like a comedy middle class, because, back then we didn't have social media. We didn't know, like, all I knew with comedy was like Seinfeld specials, like big Chris Rock, big theaters. And, you'd hear about the really legendary clubs, but I didn't realize at that age, like that, you don't have to be necessarily the most famous comedian in the world to make a living. And I also, I was an athlete as a kid, and I had a lot of health problems. And my best friend growing up, he just retired, but he played professional basketball. And as kids, it was both of our, dreams to be pro basketball players. But I had a lot of health problems, and I would say, as he got bigger and blacker, I got skinnier and whiter. So only one of us. Only one of us had a future in that business. But I was really good though at like roasting the people who he was dominating. And then having those health problems, at the time it seemed like a big setback for me. But in that span, I was like 11, 12, 13, I was home a lot. And so I got to watch a lot of great comedy. I was exposed to a lot of things that, I wouldn't have had the time or space to do if I didn't have those health problems. So it was one of those things where it's kind of like, God turned that into a good, and then I carried that forward. And so I had been doing some performing. I had opened for a pop band, like a rock band, prior to getting into stand-up, which I don't recommend. Doing comedy before a rock show is not fun. But, I done some theater, I did some filmmaking, so I was kind of well-rounded. And then, I started young, and it was kind of crazy because within my first few months of doing stand-up, I was getting offers from like, MTV and CBS to like audition for lead roles in shows. And it was like coming out of nowhere. I was like, and then like, again, I got all these health problems, and like, I won't get into the whole long story, but it's funny because at the time I was kind of doing comedy more for ego and kind of for the wrong reasons. And then, my health fell apart, and I had to kind of rebuild myself in my career. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do comedy for like just bringing people joy and the love of that. And then as soon as I was like coming at comedy from a good standpoint, all of those Hollywood opportunities completely dried up and went away. So, so do that. Yeah, do that as you please. But but that was how it started.
On cue, David, like, okay, I'm ready for my dream now, and then Hollywood was asleep at the wheel.
Totally.
we'll blame them later because we still need them, and we'll figure that part out later. But
yeah.
A specific skill set that I started off with to talk about. Not just I feel like as a comedian, I never wanted to be a comedian because I just feel like laughing on cue. I feel like I couldn't make anybody laugh even if I tried. But to watch someone else do it and do it with a specific skill set, as I mentioned, because David, you have this way of inviting people in to not just laugh. It's intriguing. It keeps people, glued to what you're going to say next. To be able to read the room like you can and have that I witnessed is a skill set that you have to be commended for. Did it always start this way, or did you pick up something as you were kind of fine-tuning who you want to be that, I can actually do this and make it work to my advantage?
That is a great question. And I think, Charles, you should really have your own radio station or radio show. You really, that's a great question. And we didn't coordinate that question either. That was a perfect, that's a really, I didn't tell him that, but that is it's a really important, insightful question, because there was a moment early on where, again, where I started, I was a little more hard-edged. I was a little more not as inviting. And one of the things, there's a comedian named Joe Klosick, who's a San Francisco legend, and I'd only been doing comedy maybe 6 months, something like that. And I would do, stuff off the cuff. I would improvise and talk to the audience and do stuff. But it was more kind of in your typical, just make fun of the person as quickly as you can, roast them, kind of mean-spirited, and get in and get out. And he really taught in that class. It was a life-changing class he taught. It was a class on riffing in stand-up and improv. And he just talked about listening. And also he talked about what a big deal it is for people in the audience, where as comedians, I've done thousands and thousands of shows. So it's like, I don't really, like for us, we do so many that we kind of forget that for some people, they may only go to one comedy show in their whole life. And it can really have an impact, what you say and what you do. And so, and he told the story, which I don't have to tell the story, but it just really was a very impactful story. And so what I started doing is, my family and I growing up, we would always do Sunday dinners. And with my comedy and with how I interact with the audience, I try to approach it as though, like, I've invited you over to my house for a Sunday dinner. And if I invite you, Charles, over to my house, even if you and I have different, whatever, political beliefs, religious beliefs, whatever it is, we're from different places, whatever, I'm not going to just immediately start ripping into you. Or if like there's something about you that's really easy to make fun of or whatever, I'm not just going to really kind of be mean to you. What I'm going to do is, is poke fun in a way that's kind of loving. And then what I've found is the more that I do that, where I create kind of a safe space for the audience, the more that the audience will they'll do the work for me sometimes. They'll say stuff like that I'm like, I would never have known that about you, and you just told me that, and that's fabulous, and let's riff on that. And it just creates a family environment. And then I also do that with my comedy, with my writing, because a lot of comedians say, you need to write stuff about that makes you angry, about subjects that make you angsty or angry or whatever. And I found for me, the best material I write are about things that either are just weird things that have happened to me personally, or about subjects that I love. So it's like, like I genuinely love the rapper Pitbull. And so I poke fun at Pitbull. I make fun of him, but it's not from a place of judgment or like, oh, that guy sucks. It's from a place of like, I love that. And just like, I love my brother, but I'll poke fun at my brother at the table. So it creates that vibe. And so I really appreciate you touching on that and sensing that, because that is something I really do work hard to. And there's certain material where I'm like, I could do this, it would get laughs, but it's outside of the vibe and the genre that I try to create. And so I'm not going to do that. So I appreciate that.
I think it's important. David Studebaker is my guest on Next Legacy Radio, and I think it's important to not just acknowledge that. Like, again, I love to laugh. I love comedy. Comedy has been a part of my life. Not just going to comedy shows, but looking at one night stands or whatever the case may be when it comes to, just wanting to take a break from the grind of the 9 to 5 or personal life to just sit into that room. Like you said, I'm invited to, or if you're inviting me to your house, then I just need to just stay and hang out and kick my feet up and see what's going on, right? So I think it's cool to be able to get that kind of environment and atmosphere for them from specific things like that. So let me ask you a question about comedy before I ask you about being an author and things like that too. Where do you see it right now in terms of, I believe the comedy shows are still relevant. It's still active. There's still sellout crowds. It's still important. When I ask, what do you think about it? I'm also thinking about how comedy was versus comedy, how it is now. There's a difference between what was and what is now, correct?
Oh yeah, big time. Big time.
What are your thoughts?
So there's kind of two different levels with it right now of how it's changed. There's the level from the business standpoint. We can tackle that first. From a business standpoint, the economics of comedy are so much different now because of the way social media it's upended everything. But there was for a long time with comedy clubs, the only thing you needed to do to be a headliner at a comedy club is just, have some sort of credits and things you've done and be funny. There was the comedy club's job really to bring in the audience. And now what's happened is because of the way that social media works and because the comedians who have gotten, who have really popped on social media, they can sell out these clubs, with just a post on Instagram. And so a lot of the comedy clubs are going, well, they're doing the work for us. And it is sometimes nowadays harder to reach comedy audiences. So they have a lot of financial pressures that kind of, push them to go towards that easy money. Now, from a creative standpoint, there's a couple things that's tricky about that right now is number one, the algorithms they're meant to kind of, they feed off of division because they feed off of engagement and comments. And so often the things that are going to really pop in the comments are things that get people arguing, either arguing about something amongst themselves or hating on the person, talking, or the subject matter. And so, it doesn't serve someone like me very well because a lot of my best material are long form stories, which don't really package into 30-second bits. And I've made a career out of trying to be inclusive in my shows and not get people angry. And so, which I'm not complaining because for me, I've been able to make a living because of that, doing corporate events, private parties, and comedy clubs and stuff. But there's shows I can do that, maybe my comedy isn't conducive to me popping quite as much on social media and selling out in giant theaters. And that's not to say that's the only kind of comedy that pops on there. But by and large, it's a big feeder of that. So, there's a lot of comics I know who these guys have been in the game, 30 years, 40 years. They've been headliners their whole lives, but they're either older or again, they're just not optimized for social media, what they do. And so they're being crowded out of the clubs and are, resorting more to cruises and private events or day jobs or different stuff like that. So, it definitely has shifted on that end. And comedy's gone through these cycles a lot over the years. There was the boom in the 80s and the early 90s, and then that shifted. So those things happen. The other thing that's happened from a creative standpoint, there's the, people getting in trouble for the things they say. What's ironic though about comedians is there's times, if you do something, so egregious, you can't come back from, like Kramer at the Laugh Factory. If you don't know what that is, Google it. I'm not going to say the words that went on there, but you know what I'm saying? There are things where I'm like, that wasn't good for your career. But a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times what I find kind of ironic is there's a lot of comedians who get, quote unquote canceled or in trouble. But what they do is that then they just leverage that to the people who like what they said, continue to capitalize on the algorithm, continue to kind of play to whatever base that is on whatever side of that it is. And then, so it actually is kind of it's a career boost for a lot of them. And so, it's tricky. However, for the comedians that are already really famous, who don't really need that boost and get annoyed, with any sort of backlash, Jerry Seinfeld, Dave Chappelle, different people have they're examples of, they don't need any extra advertising from it. And so they've just found it, they've come out kind of frustrated with the climate within it. And so, for me, I kind of, with the comedy I do, I'm kind of outside of the fray on that. But it's, as with everything with social media, it's made people so much kind of more on edge and divisive, and it's just kind of prickly. The other thing is crowd work, that a lot of comedians have found success posting crowd work videos, which again, the kind of crowd work I do is also not conducive to that, because I tend to do longer form stuff and kind of more conversation, whereas the stuff that hits in 30 seconds is like, hey, you got a stupid face, boom, whatever, and then they'll put a camera, they'll have a camera on the audience and a camera on themselves, and that works, they do well, more power to them. But for me, if my goal is to make my audience feel comfortable, putting a camera right in your face as I'm on stage is probably not going to do that. So there's a long-winded answer on the kind of the climate of the times. But yeah, it's a very interesting time.
It is interesting, but also it's needed and necessary. I mean, I think you and I can't come from that cloth of, we had thicker skin back in the day. So if somebody said something about someone, then it was what it was. Either you
totally,
you get back at them, you clap back at them and clown them, or not. Or you ran home and cried to whoever. But now everybody's hypersensitive, and it's just, some needs just, hey, I don't know if sheltered the word, David, but I just think a lot of people are oversensitive. But to each his own, I guess. It depends.
Well, yeah. I mean, what I would say, that the ironic thing about it, and I agree with you, but the ironic thing is, what I would say to all those folks who are listening, if you are of the more sheltered variety, or you are, your impulse is to lash out at a comedian or whomever on social media or get mad at them, just know you are putting money in their pocket. If you really don't like what someone's saying, just ignore them, which is the old school way of doing it. Either ignore them or clap back in person, do it in person. Right. But yeah, you're only, by going in that comment box and telling them how much you hate them, you are only adding to their visibility and making the people that love them more. So, I just take the L. Take the L.
David Studebaker is my guest on Next Legacy Radio. You can follow him on social media. Instagram, you can hit up David Studebaker. David, Studebaker. Follow, as well as hit up his link tree, linktr.ee/Studebaker as well. If you go on his Instagram, email. That's where I found him and sent him an email. And you should do that too if you want to book this guy. And also, you are an author.
Yes, sir.
I would love to know more, my friend. When did you get the bug to be able to want to put specific things out there for public consumption?
Yeah, thank you. I was always a reader. One of the things when I was sick as a kid, I read voraciously, and I've always been a big reader. And I have a degree in screenwriting. So when COVID hit, there was a script that I never sold. It was a comedy pilot that I never sold. And I'd always wanted to kind of expand that script into either a feature film or an hour-long series and kind of add some more some more mystery and suspense and kind of crazier stuff to it. And so when COVID hit, I'm like, well, I can't perform, and I don't even know if I have an industry right now. So, you know, I've always wanted to write a novel. I have this script, and so basically I just took that script and expanded it and converted it into a novel. And, you know, it's been one of the most fulfilling, if not the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. The book is called Lone Star Lance, and it's a novel, but it's, you know, it blends comedy, it has a mystery, it's got some darker undertones, but it also, in a way, it kind of is my overall, you know, way. The book is similar to kind of what I do on stage. It kind of brings people together. It's a fish out of water story of a guy, kind of based on me a little bit, whose wife forces him to move out to Texas. And, you know, I have people in my family who live in Texas, live in San Francisco. I between myself, my in-laws, everyone, there's kind of all different spectrums of everything. And, you know, in the book, you kind of see that coming together. But it's done in a way that's not kind of cheesy. It's done in a way where there's some like scary stuff that happens and some funny stuff that happens. But what's cool about it is, you know, when I do stand-up, you got to make them laugh. And I'm able to sometimes have some deeper stuff, but basically, you know, the job is to make them laugh. And what's great with this is a lot of authors would kill to do a book signing, to have, like, you know, the amount of people I get to perform for all the time. And so it's really cool because it turns every show also into a book signing, because I sell them after shows. And it won the Reader's Favorite 5-Star Award. We've gotten great feedback. It's also on Audible, if anyone likes Audible. I did the narration, and it's just Lone Star Lance on Audible. But it's been really fulfilling, and it's been cool too, because when you write a script, there's so many, even if like you're not being commissioned to do it, even if you're just writing it, right, there's so many other things you got to worry about. You got to worry about budgets. You got to worry about, you know, it's a different pacing. It's a different thing. So to be free within a novel, to just do whatever I want, write whatever I want, it was really, really cool. And I'm actually working on the sequel to it. So
nice.
It's coming. It's coming.
Love it. And people, they'll be able to pick this up on Amazon. And I know you mentioned Audible as well, you know, for, you know, the paperback as well as the Audible. It's all available. People go to Amazon, right?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. Before, you know, when airs live, but also this airs, next week as well. Anyone that's listening to this when we go live, and it's out on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all the other major platforms and streams that will be available. If you make the purchase, you send my man David an email with a receipt. Next Legacy will give the first 10 people who do make those purchases a $10 gift card from Amazon, because we support him and we want to support you. I think it's a great investment. So we will.
Oh, man, I love you, Charles.
When we do this, and I just think that we could be able to, you know, pay it forward, do it that way. So those people who are listening and will be listening, the first 10 people to purchase and email David proof of purchase will get a $10 Amazon gift card on behalf of Next Legacy. That's what I do, sir. We pay it forward. So
my God.
Here's another thing as far as that goes, as far as being an author. You just mentioned that there's a sequel in the works. You also mentioned that you're a screenwriter. Is there any movies or movie scripts that you're working on, not just for the fun of it, but to eventually put it out there for the world to see?
Yes. Well, number one, thank you for that offer to your listeners. And again, let me remind you, this is a generous man. $75 a ticket for a great cause he paid. So this is a good man. This is a very good man. You need to support this man. But yeah, there is actually. So I also am an award-winning filmmaker. I had a documentary series called David's Ark that won some awards, and we actually, ironically, we were close to a deal with a pretty big streaming network, and then that fell apart, and then COVID hit. So, but and then we didn't really, nothing happened with it later, but it kind of set the table for a project that I've always wanted to do and that is really coming to fruition right now. And we're right in the process of trying to sell it, which is a documentary series about the Studebaker car company. So I'm a third cousin of the founding brothers of the Studebaker car company, and their history is absolutely insane. And they created some of the most revolutionary cars, but they date back to the 1850s. They were the number one wagon supplier for the Union Army. They were integral in defeating the Nazis in World War II. There's so many layers, and I make it funny throughout. I'll be making it funny. We've written it all out, and we have a 16-time Emmy-winning director who's on board, and so it's going to kind of blend comedy, history, travel, and it's one of those things where like people have heard of the Studebaker cars, but it's like an onion where like there's things I didn't even know. I spent years researching this, but there's things I didn't even know where I'm like, oh wow, they did that, or that person was involved with that. Like there's just, crazy stuff. I mean, Abraham Lincoln would only ride Studebaker wagons because he loved them so much. He actually he rode a wagon to that theater that night, was a Studebaker wagon, and they have his wagon at the Studebaker Museum. They have his wagon, but they just kind of like at every point in time in history, they were on the right side of history. They also treated their workers better than any other car or wagon company. They were just, they only went out of business because of financial mismanagement later on. It just, so that is, again, I did not pay Charles to ask these fantastic questions, but that is something I'm extremely, extremely passionate about. And we're hopeful that maybe the next time we do an interview, I'll be doing a junket promoting that series, but we'll see.
Listen, I want to be the first one to be able to break all of it. So, press tours, whatever the case may be, I would love it.
Yes,
I would love it. David Studebaker is my guest on Next Legacy Radio. And a couple more questions before we all go back to work and add more content to our lives. When it comes to your legacy, how would you want people to describe what David Studebaker's legacy is?
That's a good question. I would say that, that I brought joy and love to people because, part of why I don't, go very hard edge, part of why I try to make my shows welcoming and joyful is, I respect the comics who do, political humor or more hard edge stuff or whatever. Like that's, I respect them doing that. But for me, what's really important to me is so many people are, have so many things going on in their lives that we don't know about, so many burdens that they're carrying, and so many things where they're in pain or they're just stressed or whatever. Like you said earlier, they go to a comedy club to kind of have a release and a lift from that. And so to be able to provide that to people and create a space where I'm going to do everything I can. Part of what I do on stage is I do some physical humor, I'll do some music. Like I try to do as many things as possible on stage where even if you don't think I'm the funniest person you've ever seen, you at least got a show and you at least had fun. And, I've had a lot of people, I've had people come up to me who they have said, I have been depressed and sad and in a really bad space for years now. And your show is the first time I genuinely laughed in years. And in fact, people have said those words, and, or a woman came up to me after a show. One of the, people I referenced in a bit was the name of her brother who had just gotten murdered. And this was the first time she had gone to any show, done anything, was that, and I just had said his name in a set, and she loved the show, and she said, how important that was for her to, just hear his name in the context of joy and laughter, but also to just have that lift from what was ailing her. And so that, it really means a lot to me. And it's kind of what gets me through the hard times, because it's not easy. I mean, I support a family doing comedy, and and I'm not the most famous comic, in the country. And so that requires, a lot of tough travel, a lot of, ups and downs and near misses with Hollywood and other things like that. But that's what always sustains me. And so that's really, really important to me. And, my faith is important to me, and that's a big part of it too. Just kind of, I want my legacy to just be the joy that I brought people, whoever I can, whatever I can, joy and learning, because I do try to, within my shows and within my documentaries or within my books or whatever, also try to teach people stuff too, and kind of bring whatever good messages I can. But that's the main thing, help people get through life.
That's good. I always stay true to that. Big on my faith as well, and I always believe in people helping people, pay it forward. Everything positive that you can be able to do to get the best out of someone, I think it's vital. It's important to how we go through our day to day, but also it's how we leave a legacy as well. So it's very important, very important. And as we wrap things up with David Studebaker on Next Legacy Radio, it's a music station. We play music. We have interviews. We have commercials. We have a bunch of different things. So I'm going to ask you, David, what is your favorite decade of music? What decade is the best decade of music according to David Studebaker?
Man. Oh, that's tough. I mean, it's so hard because it so much depends on genre. I'm a big reggae guy. So, like 1980s reggae, especially like late career Peter Tosh, rest in peace. Like that era where reggae was being popularized, where where we white folks had finally gotten a clue on it and picked it up, and given it the money and production quality it deserves. That era was so good. My dad is a semi-pro musician. And, the 60s, I think I have to say the 60s just because, I'm a huge Beatles guy, and that was, Elvis is still active in that time. But, man, that's it. But I'm also a child of the 90s. I was born in 89. So, you talk rap, 90s rap, that's as strong as it gets there. So I know it's a cop-out question, a cop-out answer, because I have to go genre, but I think and also each decade also has parts of music that were trash about it too, for certain genres.
Agreed.
But I'll say the 60s, because the 60s set the table for so much of what came later in terms of music. And so much of the 60s music gets sampled, and 50s too. But you look at, to me, the greatest Peter Tosh song of all time, "Johnny Be Good." That's 50s. That's 1950s Chuck Berry. But I will take a stand. I will not be a cop out. I respect you too much, Charles, to back out on this one. And I'm a big music guy. But I'm going to say the 1960s.
Okay. I could definitely respect that. I'll throw my hat in. I've been doing radio. It'll be 17 years next week. And anybody that knows me or have known me or have heard interviews that I've done over the years, I'm an 80s baby. I've always had a soft spot for 80s. You know why? Just for the simple fact that diversity was key, but also movie soundtracks. There's a lot of movies that can't listen or look at or hear a song without remembering what movie it came from or different things like that. So I love 60s for what you mentioned, because to me, I think there was a lot of diversity and inclusion in how it became what it was. And then that's where we got the 70s, right? 70s was like free for all. Let's just go and grow. And 70s music was a very interesting decade, to say the least. But
see, now you convinced me. Charles, you're right. I'm with you. I'm changing my answer. I'm flip-flopping right now. I had mentioned 80s first. I should have stuck with my instincts. I was gonna plant my flag with reggae, and then with the movies too. You're right. The movie soundtracks, reggae. I mean, some of the new wave stuff I still love. You know, even country. I like 80s country. I'm not ashamed to admit it. So, Charles, you won. This is why you are the king of Next Legacy Radio, because your wisdom and taste knows no bounds.
Man, you know what? The lucky thing is we can be able to dial it back and go backwards in time and just be there for that moment. And, you know, music took us there. Movies and music took us there. And like you mentioned, there's so many different things that came with it. So David Studebaker is my guest on Next Legacy Radio. Make sure you follow him on social media at David Studebaker. If you can't spell Studebaker, I will spell it for you. Studebaker. And if you touch your phone, you might feel it in Braille. I'm just kidding, but maybe so. I don't know. But
you never know.
You never know. I want to not only thank you for, you know, coming on, getting me this opportunity for my listeners to be able to tap into your life, but continue to keep doing what you're doing. I will say this respectfully, that you and I are not done in terms of networking and pushing out your brand and how you want to leave your legacy. I'm also next year opening the door for Next Legacy TV. That's all in development. So there's going to be some ideas that you can bring your element of who you are and what you want to a platform that will give you the opportunity to do so. So, David,
love it.
The best is yet to come, sir.
Yeah, love it. Well, hey, Charles, thank you so much for having me. This was an honor and a blast. And yeah, I look forward to all of that. You rock, man.
I will send you my information. You will have it. I will want you to lock me in, and you and I will have an off conversation about the future of how we do things in entertainment. Because, again, how we do it, pay it forward. People help people. That's how we do things.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Appreciate you, Dave.
Beautiful. Hey, appreciate you. And remember, $75 a ticket. Come on. This is a great person.
Appreciate you, my friend. I'll be at you this week or this weekend, all right?
Love it. Sounds great. Have a great night.
Thank you for listening to the #1 radio station for the people.